Hey, Falcons and NFL fans, welcome to the Atlanta Sports Unlimited channel. NFL Jocks and Pigskins news show today, this Saturday afternoon, Saturday morning in Central Time where Tom is, and on in Mountain Time and in California on the West Coast. We got another great show for you today. NFL approved their 17-game schedule this week. We're going to spend a lot of time discussing that. And right after that news hit, we heard that the Atlanta Falcons would be heading back to London this season. So we'll be discussing that as well. And we'll get to some other NFL draft news. Specifically, I think we're going to try and discuss who is the best, or can we decide who is the best defensive player in this draft class. So a lot of great topics to get to. Again, we're with Tom Pollen, and I'm Dave Holcomb. Tom, how you doing today?
Hey, doing great. Got a great day here in Chicago, nice and sunny, and it's been good. So all ready to go.
That's great. We also have Chris Smitherman behind the scenes as our producer. He might pop in and out today because he's having some internet issues, but we hope he's able to spend most of the show with us today. But the 17-game schedule news came out this week. This has been a long time coming, I guess you could say. It's been discussed for a long time, and I think this really ties in well with what we're going to discuss with the Falcons going back to London, because, yes, the bigger schedule, just in general, more games, more money, that's really the underlying thing here, but it also is going to give the NFL more flexibility with playing more games overseas.
Yeah, it will, and I know the overseas initiative by the NFL is important, but I got a problem with the 17-game schedule. I'm not as big a fan of it as I think some other people are. It seems like a lot of fans are looking forward to it. To me, you're putting another game on these players in a very physical sport, in a sport that kind of grinds them down over the course of a season. And I don't know if you're in a position now with 17 games in the season where you might start shortening some careers a little bit. Running backs are going to be carrying the ball more defensive plays, more collisions in the defensive line. Potential for more injuries. I don't know if this is a positive for the NFL as some of the things I'm seeing. It seems like it's a popular move. What do you think?
I'm mixed about it. I definitely like it a lot more than you do, I would say, just getting your initial thoughts. And we want to hear from our listeners out there what you think of the 17-game schedule. And I know there's a lot of Falcons fans angry about the Falcons going back to London this fall, and we're going to discuss that. And I also am angry about that. So I will rant about that in a little bit. But it's interesting you bring up the taxing on the NFL player's body and the money aspect of getting the extra game. On the surface, you think, well, that's just going to the teams. That's going to the owners. They're going to get most of that money. And that was my initial reaction, was basically how you're feeling. I read a little bit more about it, and there's been some injury studies. Have you read this at all this week?
No, I haven't.
There is an injury study that says that the fourth preseason game, and we should say part of this expansion is there will be one fewer preseason game. So only 3 preseason games, now 17 regular season games. There was an injury study that says that there's actually more injuries in preseason games than there are in regular season games. And part of that is because the quality of play is lower. The players that are in preseason games are fighting for their jobs. They're more likely to go overboard with a hit or something like that. Now, I can see that argument. I agree. I can't agree. I mean, I don't know. I haven't done the study myself, so I can't say I agree. But it makes sense to me However, the Stars aren't playing in that fourth preseason game anyway.
No, they're not.
So I do see what you're saying in that, Matt Ryan, Julio Jones, the Stars are going to be playing an extra game, whereas they're sitting on the sidelines in that fourth preseason game.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. It's a game where players are trying to make the team. You get that one last shot to make an impression on the coaches because cut day is the next day, and that's the way it goes. So nobody plays their starters in the fourth exhibition game anymore. And I think the way it's going right now, nobody's going to play their starters in the third. They might play them for a quarter, and the second exhibition game becomes the one where they take it a little bit more seriously, game plan it, play the starters, get some reps, and move it forward that way. But that's.
Thanks for the comment. Falcons Nation, rise up.
Falcons Nation, rise up. But, yes, you may incur more injuries. But you're not injuring any of your starters because none of them are on the field.
Yeah, right. So, that study might look at just injuries overall, and not that ACL injuries to guys that might not make the team aren't important. We don't want to put down, of course. But we're talking about the Stars here and the guys that we show up to turn the TV on to watch, and those are the players that are going to be subject to injuries in week 18. I guess it's going to be.
What do you mean week 18?
Well, the extra week is going to be week 18, right? The 17th game.
Oh yeah, right, exactly, because you got the bye week. Oh, boy. Yeah, Saturday morning, catching up with me again. Yeah, because you got the bye week, so it'll be week 18.
Mm-hmm. we got a comment from Gary. Personally, I think expanding the NFL schedule and having more international game weekends, traditional fan interest, because we are going to see less of the Stars in prime time. So it sounds like Gary doesn't like the international series.
Okay. On one hand, I can understand that. But the NFL has developed a fan base in Europe, in Great Britain. I have Twitter followers who are overseas and who enjoy football and find themselves as football fans because the NFL pays attention to them.
Are they Americans, or are they English people, or are they both?
English, yeah, English. English people who've caught on to the game because the NFL has moved games overseas, and they've been in the stands for games, and it's on at a time when they can conveniently watch a game instead of well, you've been there, the time difference. I'm not aware of the time difference. Falcons Nation, I do agree with you. Any team that goes to London should get a bye after, and I think they do. I think that's part of the schedule making. I think that's required, is they get a bye week after they go overseas.
There have been some teams that haven't had bye weeks after the London game, but that's been by choice.
That's their choice.
Right.
That's their choice. Yeah, that's right.
So basically, if you go overseas, if you go to London, then the NFL puts your bye after that game, unless you say we don't want our bye that week, and you really should have your bye that week.
Now the main market for the NFL is here, United States, nationwide, and what eventually are you going to do with this London market? Are you going to put a team over there eventually? I think that's what ties into it. And Dave, I know you've done some writing on the subject. You're you're a big expert on what could be done with a London team. You are. You've written some very good columns about it.
Thank you, Tom. Yeah, I haven't written any recently, but I studied there in 2013 and 2012. So I love London. It's my favorite city in the world, actually. So it's very near and dear to my heart, the place. But as an NFL city, I think this is as far as they can take the London game. Other than just, I think the farthest they can do it, and part of why I like the 17 game schedule is I'd like to see this happen is have 8 games in London per season, but not give them a team. They basically they get 16 opponents. They have 8 different teams have a home game in London, and that's the schedule that we have in London. We don't put a team regularly there. We just have kind of teams traveling there. It would be every other season. If you have 8 games there, 16, it breaks down really well. 16 teams play there once a season. You go there every other year. You give up a home game every 4 years. That would be the fairest way to do it. And with the 17 game schedule, I didn't have that in my hypothesis a few years ago. But with the extra game, you can have teams go over without giving up an 8th home game. You still have your 8 home games, and in a season where you have a 9th home game, that 9th home game ends up being a London game, every 4 years, I guess it would be. The issue I have with tying this into the Falcons, the issue I have with the Falcons going to London in 2021 is the NFL. I mean, rightfully so. They're trying to make the schedule as fair as possible. So they've given all the AFC teams in 2021 the 9th home game. So if you have a situation where you don't want the Steelers and Ravens to be upset that one of those teams has an extra home game. But what you're doing by having the Falcons go to London in 2021 and give up a home game, now they only have 7 home games and they play 10 road games, 9 true road games, and then a neutral site game in Europe. Completely not, I think, in the spirit of expanding to this 17 game schedule. The point is everyone gets 8 home games every year moving forward, even if you play in London, and that's not happening for the Falcons.
No, it's not. And yeah, it's a problem because, how did that happen this year? I mean, how did they really make that happen? I don't know why.
I don't know why they have it set up that way, and I haven't looked at who else is going to London, who else is giving up the home game. Is there another NFC team in this situation? We should look this up. But why not just have all the AFC teams going to London this year? That's give up their home games. That's their home game, unless I guess they're putting Atlanta in a game in London where they're playing another NFC opponent would be my guess, and that's why Atlanta gets the short end of the stick. It's either them or the other team, that other NFC team they play. But
we don't know until the schedule comes out.
Right. So, yeah, we won't know until, I guess, there's a schedule. Schedule usually comes out in April. Is it coming out this month?
Yeah, it should be coming out soon. Right.
It came out in May last year because of the pandemic, but
right.
I think it might be out next week or sometime before the draft. But just completely, I don't get it. I don't understand I'm not against Atlanta giving up a home game to play in London. I'm not against teams playing in London. I like the international series. I like the Sunday morning game. I do.
It is fun. Yes.
And I think that is what I envision this series being. 8 games in London every other week. If you have a 18 game schedule, start week 2. Don't do it week 1. Start week 2 where you have and put every London game Sunday morning. I think it makes it special as opposed to putting the London game at 1:00 on the East Coast where nobody watches that game unless it's their team's playing. Put it in the morning slot. Or, I was kind of hypothesizing this morning. Could you do a situation where you put the London game on Monday afternoon? We saw that with some games move because of COVID last fall, experimenting with the scheduling. Could they have a situation where they put a London game at 8:00 local time in London Monday night, and it would be 3:00 on the East Coast? I know it's not perfect for fans that are at work on Monday, but is that better than Sunday morning for some people? I don't know. I think it's an interesting idea. If you're into getting more football on live TV, on national TV, it could be another alternative. Maybe they could play with that and Sunday morning. I don't know. And then you have an extra day also to get used to the time change, as opposed to playing on Sunday, you're playing Monday that week, and then you have the bye, so you're not short changed that.
I was about to say you definitely have to have the bye that way.
Right.
You can't do that any other way. But that's an interesting concept. I don't think I've heard anybody bring that one up as a possibility.
Maybe I'm overseeing some detail, and that's why it wouldn't work. I don't know, but
I don't know.
I think I hate to say anything positive came out of coronavirus, but one positive of COVID was we were, as humans around the world, we were put in situations where we had to do certain things, and then we kind of realized, you know what? This might be better than the way we were doing it before. And maybe one of those ways is putting a Monday evening, Monday afternoon game in the NFL every once in a while. I don't know if it would work every week, but every once in a while, and that would be the London game. I think the London game needs to be in a spot where it's the only game playing, I guess is my conclusion, to make it special, make it worthwhile.
Right.
And it's an extra game. It's hard to complain about extra football. So it's an extra game that will appear on some network or some streaming service for fans to watch if you're available to watch the game at that time, Sunday morning, Monday afternoon, whatever.
Well, in baseball, they call it the businessman special. You have the 3:00 game where everybody gets off and they get off work after a half day and head out to the ballpark or to the nearest bar.
Right.
It's the NFL establishing a businessman special.
And I've heard from friends during the conference tournaments a few weeks ago, the men's and women's conference tournaments, that those games are on during the day, and I had some former coworkers say, why don't we have more afternoon sports? They're great. And you know what? Maybe NFL can tap into that need of fans wanting to see afternoon sports during the week, not just in the weekend. Because baseball is really the only sport that consistently does it.
Yeah, they're the only ones, right? NHL, NBA, they'll do it on a special occasion, but baseball's the only one that ever plays day games and or tries to make a special, 3:00 start time and make it easier for everybody to cut out work and enjoy a ball game for half a day. So. It's not a bad thought. I'm surprised the NFL hasn't done some research on that one to begin with.
I should send that idea into my application to the NFL. I'm going to join the PR team of the NFL. So I think that's the positive. There are a few other positives that I would say come out of the 17 game schedule. The London set up, and I see it expanding, not to the point of a team. I would be against having a team there, but expanded to the point where we have 6, 7, 8 games there, put it Sunday morning, Monday afternoon, whenever. And the other positive of the 17 game schedule is we're going to get more marquee out of conference matchups.
Oh yeah.
Like this year we're getting Chiefs and Packers. Steelers and Seahawks is another matchup that I circled. The Ravens are going to play the Rams. So there's a lot of good matchups that we only get once every 4 years because of the rotation with NFC and AFC. And now we're going to get, Mahomes and Aaron Rodgers more often, possibly. They have to finish in the same spot in the division, and they have to the stars have to align basically for that to work out. But that I think that's a positive too. The negative is, we're also getting Panthers playing the Texans, potentially with no Deshaun Watson. That's going to be a snoozer. So not every game is going to be a must-see game, but there will be a lot of great matchups that we'll want to watch.
Not every game is a marquee game anyway. I mean, every weekend you got dogs that nobody but the home crowds are gonna be watching. So I mean that's nothing new.
Mm-hmm.
See, what I don't like about that again is I like the final game of the season being inside your division, and it seems like that's generated a lot of energy, a lot of interest, because you got so many playoff scenarios that come into that final game, and you're playing a division rival. And,
Right.
Well, you do have a lot riding on those week 17 games, the way they were doing it. And now you play the week 17 game. Now you got another one where you're playing outside your conference. And it seems a bit watered down to me than what we've had last, few years that they've set up this intra-division schedule.
But don't you think they're going to move week 17 to week 18? They're not going to put these out-of-conference games in the final week of the season.
I don't know. I'll be interested to see. I'm not sure. I would hope so. I hope that's the way they do it.
Yeah, I would assume.
I don't assume anything when it comes to the NFL.
Okay. Yeah. Well, lesson learned by Falcons fans, because I just assumed that the Falcons going to London wasn't that big of a deal when I initially heard it, because they would have 9 home games. But then I read about it, and they don't have 9 home games this year. They have 8, and now they only have 7.
Now they only have 7. It's unfair. It shouldn't be allowed to happen. And that it's not supposed to happen. They're supposed to be watching out for these disparities when they send a team to London.
Yeah.
You're supposed to have they want to make it as fair a process as possible and as even a process as possible, but they really they missed on this one, and I don't know where they went wrong or why they went wrong. But this is something the NFL usually tries to avoid.
I guess I can't be too surprised this has happened. I am shocked, because it seems like a no-brainer to just try to avoid this. But I'm not shocked, because the commissioner, Roger Goodell, last fall said that fans don't have an impact on games. He actually said that when it came to media questioning whether it was fair that some teams had fans during the pandemic and some teams didn't. And he said, well, fans don't have a big impact on the games. I
think you'd find an argument from that by the players. I think the players missed fans being in the stands last year. I think
everybody knew, yeah.
Having the fans, late in the fourth quarter, you're driving, you're trying to win the game, or you're trying to hold on to a game.
Yeah.
And you really start getting noise generated. I think players feed off of that. I think that's one of the things we lost last year. And I've seen players mention that it becomes difficult when you don't have that surge, that adrenaline surge that you get from the fans starting to really, get excited about what's happening.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. I think everybody just rolled their eyes at everybody knew Goodell was, you're not supposed to call people liars in the media, but he was telling a fib. It was not true what he was saying. I think he knew that it was not true too.
As I say, ask the players and you're going to get a whole different story.
Yeah. Yeah. So he's running the league, obviously. And if that's the approach that he takes, that it wasn't a big deal to have fans at some places and fans at not at other places, then he's going to have the same approach when it comes to the Falcons losing a home game.
Oh, and that's the thing. And that's probably what popped into, that's one of the reasons why the Falcons end up with only 7 home games.
Yeah.
If he has that mindset, then, it's more important for him to send teams overseas than make sure it's balanced.
Right.
And I know Falcons fans would rather be at the stadium, would rather fill the stadium and be there to cheer on the team. Everybody would. I mean, we're all fans. I would rather be at Soldier Field. Fans all over the country would rather be at their home stadiums cheering on their team. And it gets to be rough when you lose out on that extra game.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
it's not a fair thing. And the Falcons, you can't say, well, it doesn't matter to the Falcons. They only won 4 games last year. Well, it does matter. It's a new season. You never know what you're going to get.
Right.
So you can't look at their record and say, well, it's the Falcons. It's just, okay, so we take them down to 7 home games. What's the big deal? They're not going to be in the playoffs anyway. Well, what if they do a good job drafting? They have a solid team going into next year, and they do get themselves back to being a playoff contender. Now you're really screwing them up by sending them to London for a week and not letting them play at home at Mercedes-Benz Stadium.
Right. Yeah. There's very few teams that you can say at the beginning of the season, and we're not even at the beginning of the season yet, obviously, but very few, like 1 or 2, that you can say this team is not making the playoffs, 100% not making the playoffs, and be right. There's just, it's such a balanced league, so much parity. You can't say the Falcons are definitely not making the playoffs or not going to be contending for the playoffs.
No, you can't. Falcons have problems. We all know that. But you still have Matt Ryan, and you still have one hell of a receiver core to run out on the field every week. Mm-hmm. So, this is not it. And plus you got a new head coach. So, this is, you got a whole new scenario, and, you never know what you're going to get once the team starts hitting the field. Maybe they do compete more. Last year, they were 0-7 against teams that were 500 when they played them. Maybe they turn that around next year. It's happened before. Worst to first has happened quite a bit in the NFL. So you can't discount that.
It's happened a lot in the NFC South too. Like that's the division where we probably had the most turnover. Maybe not recently as much, but a lot of that division, all the teams have been competitive since its creation.
Yeah, exactly. So, you can't say that the Falcons aren't going to be competitive next year. New regime, new player, new general manager, new coach, and you still got one of the best quarterbacks in the league, and in my opinion, a future Hall of Famer. I think Matt Ryan does go to the Hall of Fame. So, as long as you got a Hall of Fame quarterback, you got a shot to go somewhere.
I think our listeners, our Falcons fans, are going to like that statement, Tom. Matt Ryan going to the Hall of Fame.
I think he is. He's in the top 10 in just about every major passing category. And he's been a consistent winner with the Falcons, and I don't know how you keep him out. I know, lack of Super Bowl. I don't even blame the Super Bowl loss on him.
Yeah.
That wasn't his loss.
Yeah.
There were some decisions made that made that loss happen. And so, I think Matt Ryan is quality, and he's going to the Hall of Fame. There's no doubt in my mind.
One of the other negatives I want to explore with the 17-game schedule is this disparity that in fair competition, what we're discussing right now with the Falcons going to London and losing a home game, only having 7 home games next year. I do like that the league has uniformed it where the AFC is going to have the 9th home game this year. The NFC will have the 9th home game next year, all the NFC teams. So that makes it fair for your division opponents and even the other teams in your conference that you're competing for that bye with. But having that extra game is going to there's no other way around it, and I think the positives outweigh the negative. But the negative is you have a situation where let's look at the AFC North for instance. You have the Steelers and Ravens playing playoff teams, and the Browns draw the Arizona Cardinals. And if the Bengals are going to be competing next year, they have the 49ers, a team that was injured but maybe a little bit down, looks like going to have a change at quarterback. So that is just another thing that you have to overcome in order to win the Super Bowl is this scheduling change. You only had 2 different games that you didn't share with your division opponents. Right. In the AFC North, this coming year, the Steelers are going to play the Bills and the Titans, whereas the Ravens would be playing the Patriots and the Colts. The difference there. Last year it was the Ravens played the Chiefs and Patriots, and the Steelers drew the Bills and the Broncos. It was the Broncos. So there's differences there. And you know what? It doesn't always end up being that the team in first place playing the first place team is the disadvantaged team, because Steelers played the Bills last year. They were a second place team in 2019, and the Ravens played the Patriots. The Bills ended up being better than the Patriots in 2020. So it's funny how the schedule works out. But I guess my point here is the schedule is going to be – it's always been important, but it's even more important now with the extra game, your conference, whether or not you have the home game, extra home game that season. Are you making a trip to London? There's going to be more London trips. And who is that extra non-conference opponent that you draw?
Yeah, it makes a huge difference. I mean, it really does. I got a question for you, Dave.
Okay.
If the NFL isn't going to put a team in London, why continue this? What's the point? I'm serious. Why are you doing this? Do you really expect to draw? Does the London audience hike up the television numbers enough to make the ratings enough to make it worthwhile? Are they gaining enough money to make this worthwhile? Are there enough positives to keep doing this if you're not going to put a team over there? You're generating a fan base for the NFL. I think they've been successful at that.
Yeah.
But eventually they don't have a rooting interest anywhere. Are you going to be able to maintain that interest overseas? Why keep doing this if you're not going to put a team there and include London in the league?
Well, I don't know ultimately the league's plans. Maybe it really is to put a team there. I just think logistically it's not possible, and is silly to not silly to discuss, but silly to try. But I think to answer your question, it generates more revenue, and more fans come to see the games. It has the NFL. It builds a national brand for the league and for the sport, and other sports are ahead of the NFL, admittedly, around the world, or football around the world. It's really an American game, and yes. I think the NFL is taking it upon themselves to popularize American football everywhere. And if that might not mean having a team in London, but it could mean kids growing up in London and in England playing American football instead of soccer, or playing American football in addition to what they call football, so our soccer. And then maybe some of those kids grow up and they end up playing in the NFL. I think NHL uses the same argument that they want to expand their game into Asian countries and other places around the world to tap into athletes in those countries. I think the NFL is trying to do the same thing, but I also think it generates a lot of revenue even if you don't have a rooting interest, that people are watching the games in England, in London. They go to the games. I think that the NFL was talking about playing in Germany now. I don't know how that works into the international series, but it's all about brand building and making.
Yeah, true.
It's an additional revenue stream, having more people over in Europe and building a fan base there. Not to mention, the reason why I asked about are they English people or Americans that your Twitter followers are. There's a lot of Americans in London. I really met a lot over there, and they are starved for American sports. And the one sport that consistently goes over there is football, is the NFL. And even if they don't have a local team, they probably have a team that they followed back when they were living in America, and they still follow that team because of all of the abilities, the internet and streaming. They have the ability to follow that team. They're not going to root for a London team anyway, but they go to the neutral. They go to the games when they're in London.
That's a good point. And it's something I hadn't considered. And it's a good point. I think the NFL is just going to keep doing it. You mentioned Germany, and you seem to be a little hesitant about it. Remember when there was the World League of American Football, or whatever they called it? It was very popular in Germany. The German teams actually made money. They had some great attendance.
NFL Europe? Is that what
is that what the NFL Europe? Yes. Yeah. The two teams they had in Germany were very popular. There is an audience for NFL football in Germany, so it becomes a little harder, I think, because you're traveling a little bit farther. But I know the interest is there. So I don't know how you make it work, but the interest is there.
Yeah, I didn't mean to suggest the interest isn't there. I agree with you that there is a fan base there that can be tapped into. It's just another time zone. If you're already playing 4, or I propose playing 8 games in London, you're going to play games in Germany now too. On top of that, are you going to play 4 games in London, 4 games in Germany? I don't know. It's you have to work those things out before it happens.
Yeah, it becomes a lot rougher. And again, you've got to even it out so that you're not costing teams a competitive advantage like you are the Falcons this year.
Right. It really is a travesty, I would say, that the Falcons are only getting 7 home games in a season where, their division opponents are going to have 9 road games, yes, but they've got 10 essentially, and going over to London, and they will be using their bye in after the London game, and don't really have. I don't want to say they don't have a bye, they do, but it's got to be used after that London game, I think. I mean, they have the choice not to use it then, but I think it's stupid not to use your bye after traveling back from England.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think you have to. You want to keep your competitive edge. I think you have to. So it's just a rough thing. It's rough to. Team USA versus Team Asia. Asia gets slaughtered.
Yes, that's true. I think if we had Team USA in football play Team London in football, American football, they would get slaughtered too. But it's building the sport over time, right? That's what they're trying to do. And it sounds like Falcons Nation wants you want an NHL team in Hawaii? That would be interesting.
Yeah, you got mid-major college football team in Hawaii that's done fairly well. But Hawaii, again, it's a tough trip. It's, let's see, I think it's 4 time zones from Los Angeles. It's 6 time zones from where I live. I was there once. It's a rough trip. It's not an easy trip to take. So, again, you run into that travel issue, catching up with, trying to catch up from the travel, as well as playing the game there. It's not an easy thing.
So that Hawaii is 7 time zones away from the East Coast?
Yeah, I believe so. Right.
Wow. I mean, London is closer in terms of time zones.
That's true. Yeah, it is. No, as I said, I went to Hawaii, and the flight there wasn't as bad, but just adjusting to the time difference. I woke up one morning at like 3 a.m, and it was 9 o'clock back home, but it was 3 a.m. I was wide awake. It's what you're used to.
Yeah.
And that's right. That's going to be hell on an NFL team.
Right.
So,
at least in the NFL, you have a week to prepare. That's really not enough time to adjust to 6 time zones. But at least you have a week to do that, as opposed to a hockey team, you travel in for one game. That would never work.
No. So, but one of the things that's interesting is rugby players seem to be able to make a transition to NFL football. There have been a couple of rugby players kind of make their move into the league over the past couple of few seasons, and I wonder how that would actually impact the game, because it's a closer fit to what the NFL does, to how the NFL plays,
right,
than soccer, and it's still popular over there.
Yeah.
But you do see, some pretty big guys who. Oh, thank you, Falcons Nation.
Thank you, Falcons Nation.
Glad you love the show. But you get some pretty big guys who can play offensive line, defensive line, and make an impact on an NFL team. Even though they haven't played American football before, they've had that full contact experience by playing rugby.
Right, and that gets back to my point of if the NFL has more games there, if there's more exposure to the sport, and kids get exposed to it as a young age, and if there are organized leagues where they can play in, then maybe they don't even have to have a situation where they transition later in life. They can play as a kid play American football, but that doesn't happen if they're not following the NFL first, and if the NFL doesn't build their brand in England.
Yeah, well, the NFL is going to keep doing this. We'll see how it evolves over time. I mean, that's all we can do.
Mm-hmm. So have I convinced you to like the 17-game schedule a little more?
Again, I think it's rougher on the players. I think it's going to be a tough thing for the players. Your running backs who carry more than 250 times in the season tend to wear down more than maybe a back who only carries between 200, 225. This kind of stuff actually makes a difference. There's Bogey. We don't have Zozo, but we have Bogey today.
Oh, okay. Hey, Bogey.
But I don't know, where's Zozo sleeping? She's probably bored with us. She doesn't want to be part of the show today.
Yeah.
So,
just picture Olympic football team USA versus Team Russia.
Oh, I'd go for that. I'd love that. I'd love that. I remember World Cup a couple of years ago where the USA played Russia in soccer in their, division of 4, and that was a very good game. I think ended 1-0, but it was a very good game.
I love it.
Yes, absolutely. Oh God, yeah, I love that. So,
Yeah, Rocky IV. I love Rocky IV. Great movie. I
enjoyed it too.
I understand what you're saying about the players, and I concur. One thing I was reading as well that I think is a positive, I brought up the money aspect, where a lot of the money potentially going to the owners and not the players that are actually playing the extra game. Actually, that's not true. From what I read, that there is a lot of this money from the extra revenue streaming from international games, from the extra week in the season, will be funneled back into the players. And I think that's why ultimately the Players Association agreed to this, because they know that, yes, injuries are going to go up, careers might get shorter, but they're going to make more money in the long term. And that's actually a good thing to hear at this point, because the salary cap went down this offseason.
Yeah.
That's going to be a one-time thing. The salary cap is definitely going to go up again.
Oh, with the new television deals? Oh, yeah.
Right.
It's going to skyrocket. Deferring some of these salaries to future years isn't going to have that rough impact that it normally does. Where it doesn't put you against, it gives you salary cap room this year, puts you up against salary cap next year.
Right.
You're going to see some big salary cap jumps in the next couple of seasons as it is. So
I think that's good for the players and fans because it increases the likelihood that you keep your players.
Right.
And that's, I think, free agency is good for players, but I think it's good when players stay where they are and get paid because that helps build loyalty for fans if you're rooting for the same players every single year.
It really does. It does. So the thing is, the salary cap is a percentage of revenues that come in. So yeah, the players are always going to see a portion of what comes in. It's always a percentage of what the league makes as a total. So, if an extra game comes into the picture, there's going to be more money under the salary cap. There has to be, because that's the way it's bargained under the CBA.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. So I get I hear what you're saying about careers getting shorter, likelihood of injuries going higher in week 18. But hopefully, another thing I could bring up about the pandemic, I think we're going to see some of the changes that the league made to training camp and preseason actually take full effect. They adopt it permanently. This ramp up period, I read that preseason is going to end more than a week before the regular season starts, not just 10 days before, but maybe like 2 weeks before, to have an extra weekend off. To just rest the body more. If that has a positive impact and we can do those little things and that helps offset the injuries that come up in week 18, I think it's worth. I think it's
help
a good
the durability. Yeah. I read somewhere this week that Patrick Mahomes was worried about the durability as far as getting to a 17 game and then going into the playoffs, that he was going to have to prepare more for a 1 game longer season. So it's going to be interesting to see how the players react to this as we go on and we read more about it.
For me, I think a lot of times I look at change as bad. I don't know if you feel the same way, but I looked at the change of the extra point years ago. I was like, no, why are they doing this? And then I saw it and I was like, this is a great change. I really love it. Especially when you can block the extra point and return it for 2 the other way. I really liked that rule change after seeing it. And I'm not as big of a fan of the expanded playoffs as the change in the extra point, but having the extra playoff game was fun. Having the 7 teams in the conference instead of just 6, it takes away a bye. I didn't like that part of it, and that's why I'm hesitant to say I love it. But the extra football was nice on Wild Card Weekend. So I think there's a chance that if you're anything like me, Tom, you might be hesitant and say, all right, I don't like this. There's these negatives, and there are definitely negatives. But when we finally see it and we get to week 18 and we have an extra weekend of football, and then we're talking about Super Bowl in middle of February, that's the other change. Super Bowl 56 is February 13th now. So we're talking about real football until Valentine's Day. It's going to be weird, but I think that's a positive too.
Do you? It'd be interesting to see. I'm an old guy, Dave. So we don't like change. No, we don't like change.
I understand your reluctancy to change, but I think once you are forced to do it, I think you're going to like it.
Actually, I'm not as set against change as some might be. You're always going to have change, and you gotta buy into it. Oh, it's time to get down. So you got to buy into it, and knock my notes over, but I'm fine with this. And can we kind of move forward at that? I want to bring up one other change I saw this morning that I think is interesting. The onside kick rule is there's a proposal to only for receiving team to only have 9 men up front when it comes to the onside kick. Yeah, instead of 10 or 11, or the entire team in onside kick situations, having the receiving team only allowing 9 players up front, and hopefully increasing the chances that you can get a successful onside kick. I mean, it's never going to be
high,
play that's going to happen unless you got, Young Wei Koo, who seems to be damn good at it.
With this rule change, Young Wei Koo is going to be like 80% onside kicks.
I know. I mean, Young Wei Koo is about the only kicker who has been able to do it on a regular basis. So it'd be interesting to see. But, there is a talk about a change that way too. So I'll be interested to see how that moves forward.
I like that idea too. Any way to try and increase the onside kick success rate, I think would be very good, because without, sacrificing safety. They got to find a way to do it safely, and taking away players would do that.
Right. So, and I think it beats the hell out of the 4th and 25 option that they keep bringing up every year, which I just do not like. And
you don't like that at all?
I wish they would put that to bed and give it up. But I could see having 9 players, up front for the receiving team. I can deal with that.
I'm not against the 4th and 25 idea, but I would prefer to stay with special teams, because if you're going to put in the 4th and 25 play, then you're taking away you're taking away kickers. You're taking away a exciting play, the onside kick.
Yeah, right. It is. So I would rather see him keep the onside kick. It's it's still a part of the game. You're changing the game too much, in my opinion, if you go to the 4th and 25 route. And I'm with you. I was very skeptical about the extra point change that they made.
Yeah.
And after I started seeing it, I really like it. I like what they did. I think it works. I was a little surprised at that. I didn't think I was going to like it. I thought I was going to hate it. And
I hated it. I hated the rule change when it happened, and when I saw it, I liked it as well. Loved it. I mean, there's a lot of positives to it. It's just not a guaranteed point now. It means something,
right?
You have to.
It does.
Your kicker is more important, and it's more likely to be blocked. You have the 2 point going the other way potentially. So there's a lot of good parts of that rule change. Yeah.
So,
but we got just a couple more minutes left in the show. We're going to get to draft stuff in the coming weeks. I think how many we have? 2 Saturdays before the draft, and then we have the Saturday of the draft. So we're probably going heavy draft in the next few weeks. Why I didn't feel so bad talking about these changes to the league instead of the draft board. But one thing we brought up, I think it was last week when we were talking about maybe the Falcons taking a defensive player at number 4. Who would that defensive player be? And we both were kind of puzzled by that, because there isn't a consensus top defensive player. And I wanted to bring up an article at NFL.com released yesterday where the experts, the draft and analysts, agree with us that there is no consensus. So we got a few people liking the Penn State linebacker Micah Parsons. Mark Ross likes the Alabama quarterback Patrick Surtain, and then Maurice Jones-Drew, which I feel like is always the ugly duckling, I guess, where he just picks. He has a take that nobody else has.
He always does, yes.
His opinion on the best defensive player in the draft is Oregon safety Javon Holland, who admittedly I don't know much about.
I don't know much about him. And I've done a lot of reading on players this week, to try and get a gauge on where that number 4 pick, where the Falcons might want to land. And I'm telling you, it's amazing how many mock drafts you look at and how everything is so different. Everybody has a different idea of what teams are going to do. But there isn't a consensus pass rusher, and that's one of the things that's going to hurt the Falcons' chances of moving back and maybe trading and getting some extra picks in the draft, because there isn't that consensus pass rusher. And teams aren't going to trade up for a receiver. And as good as Kyle Pitts is, they're not going to trade up to get him. It's not a top thing to trade up to get a receiver. So there's a lot of possibilities. I've seen a couple of offensive linemen join Penei Sewell as possibilities that might be available. But right now, unless one of the quarterbacks does slip backwards, it's going to be tough for the Falcons to make a deal. However, they still have 3 round 5 and 2 round 6 picks. So, it's not a bad thing. They still have picks to build some depth with.
Yeah.
It's a strong first round. They can find a lot of difference makers in the first round if they move back. But the problem right now is it's hard to see a team wanting to move up. And that's the key, is who's going to move up to get to move into number 4, unless the Jets do something surprising and take an offensive line, one of the top offensive linemen. And, it's hard to see that happening. But I've seen mock drafts that have Sewell going to the Jets and quarterbacks falling farther back. I've seen Fields as far back as 9. So it's hard to say right now, the possibilities for the Falcons at number 4. And if Fields does drop back, if a couple quarterbacks do drop back, if there's some surprises ahead of them, you might get one of these quarterback desperate teams like the Bears who want to try and move up and have some draft capital, and maybe the Falcons can take advantage of that.
I'm going to put you on the spot here, if you don't mind. So let's say the quarterbacks go 1, 2, 3, and the Falcons pick 4. And I agree with you. I think I was arguing this last week, that in order for the Falcons' number 4 pick to be coveted, a team's got to fall in love with Mac Jones or Trey Lance and trade up to 4 to get him, and then we would see history with 4 quarterbacks going in the top 4. It never happened before. So I agree with you. It's unlikely that that's to happen. So let's say the quarterbacks go 1, 2, 3, and the Falcons stay at 4. Don't trade it. You don't have to give me a specific player. Are you going offense or defense?
Well, the problem is I looked at some of the stats this week from what the Falcons did, how the Falcons finished last season. And I'm telling you, it's tough to say, because the Falcons were 25th on defense in creating negative pass plays. That's, the number of quarterback dropbacks, opposing quarterback dropbacks, divided by interceptions and sacks. And, they were 25th in the league. They're not getting any pressure. They're not creating sacks, and they're not creating interceptions. So, either way, a defensive player is going to be a big acquisition for the Falcons there. But they were 31st in rushing yards per attempt last season. So, on defense, defensive passer rating, opposing quarterbacks had 100.5 passer rating against the Falcons defense last year.
Yeah.
No, it's terrible. You've got to do something to turn that around. Passing wise, the Falcons are in good shape. It's just a running game and on defense where you've got to find a way to close some of these holes. But I don't see an edge rusher that really says, we have to have him. Surtain at quarterback, he might be the guy because you put him in, with Terrell from last year, and now maybe you have a better secondary situation. Because again, another thing that I looked at is on defense, AJ Terrell was targeted 106 times last year and gave up 71 completions. Yeah, that's a rough thing to take in your secondary. They don't have anybody who was really a shutdown corner last year. And Surtain's going to be a shutdown corner. So maybe he is the guy. Micah Parsons, you have the off-field issues, but glowing reports about Parsons everywhere from what I've read about his ability, his speed, his ability to slip tackles. So, you have a few ways you can go here. You do need a running back, but from what I've been seeing, you might be able to get that later.
Yeah.
If the Falcons could trade back into the first round, there was a running back I saw who I really like, Javonte Williams out of North Carolina. Has been getting some high grades out of everybody. If you could trade back into the first round, you might be able to get him. And the Falcon, you might be able to get a defensive difference maker plus a running back who is considered a very polished guy who can slip blocks, powerful runner, and very effective in the passing game. So Javonte Williams has kind of become my favorite running back so far in this draft.
I like him as a running back to the Falcons as well. I think he would pair very nicely with Mike Davis. We're out of time, unfortunately, Tom. So we'll explore more Falcons and draft stuff next weekend. Follow us on Twitter at TJ Pollen, at DM Holcomb. Thanks a lot, Chris, for being part of the show. And thank you for listening. We'll be back next Saturday.